Yo, what is up? It is the Fantasy Bros. Today we're talking trade targets for Week 7. Players to trade for to help you win your league. Before we get started, we'd appreciate it if you guys subscribe. Consider subscribing. It's free. We're trying to hit 200 subscribers. We're a smaller channel, so we'd really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get into the trades. And to start the trade talk, I'm going to say trade for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of the few elite quarterbacks this year in which there are only a handful. And he's had 3 midweeks in a row. So I would go try to trade for him. He's going to be elite throughout the year. He's looked good on the field. He's had a rough patch, but we know through the history of watching Lamar Jackson that he can get it done on the ground, which is elite for fantasy. So if you can trade one of your struggling or middling quarterback play and upgrade to Lamar Jackson, I would do that. Players I'm thinking about, if you could package trade Brady and some other piece, or even Dak Prescott, who's coming back from injury. Aaron Rodgers, absolutely. Even players like Joe Burrow, I would rather have Lamar Jackson off of a huge week. You might be able to get him straight up. I'd go for the rushing consistency that he brings to fantasy football. So I'm trading for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, if you look at how his bad games have lined up, it's conversely as soon as Rashad Bateman went down with injury.
True.
So the first 2 games Bateman played, Lamar Jackson blew up. The last 2.5, 3-ish games, Bateman got injured mid-game and missed the last 2, and he's looked a little not as great. So whenever Bateman comes back healthy, I think Lamar is going to be poised to take off.
And he is practicing, so get him before it's too late. He could absolutely explode this week. So
yeah. All right, so my first buy low/buy lows is going to be Zeke and Tony Pollard. So Zeke more so, he'll cost you a little bit more than Pollard, and he's going to be someone that you could typically start as your RB2 every week. Pollard, if you need a flex with upside, I would go after. So Dak is coming back this week. He's already started practicing. He's been cleared. He's a full go. They've already talked about him playing, and he said he's not missing this game. So they get Detroit this week, which is the best matchup you can have for fantasy running backs. And who do they have next week? The Chicago Bears. Another top 5 matchup you could have for your running backs. So with Dak coming back, the offense should be better. They should be scoring more points, which means more scoring opportunities for Zeke. So they get 2 really easy opponents, a bye week, and then 2 more really easy opponents after the bye week. So I think you could get Zeke or Pollard pretty cheap right now, and I would do it especially if you have a need at running.
yeah, Zeke, people are extremely disappointed in Zeke. I think he went in about the 4th round. Early as the 3rd round in some leagues. So the production has been disappointing, but with that coming back, like you said, that does help out the offense. And honestly, he's been consistent. His workload is consistent, and I don't think that's changing. The coaching staff wants to use him. They're paying him, and they're going to use him. It's going to be more of the same. I think there will be more touchdown opportunities with the quarterback upgrade. But he's going to be, like I said, he's going to be consistent. And if you can get 10 points out of your running back and you can get him on the cheap, I would do that. Similarly, one of my buys this week is Ceedee Lamb. So that also is an asset that is going to help out with the return of Dak Prescott. I mean, he's already been a pretty good wide receiver, but he hasn't had that monster game that, Michael Pittman and A.J. Brown and these other wide receiver ones have. So you can probably get him a little bit cheaper than those guys. And he should be an ascending asset with Dak Prescott coming back. In the past 2 weeks, Cooper Rush has not thrown for 200 yards. It was like 185, and like the game before that was like barely even 100 yards. And you can't really produce as a receiver in that kind of offense. And Dak is going to sling it a lot more. He has the highest target share in the league right now, so his usage is elite. If that passing offense just gets a little better, he is absolutely going to be a wide receiver 1, if not a top 5, top 6 wide receiver rest of season. This could be the year that he actually breaks out, and at worst, he's going to continue what he's been doing, which is still pretty good. So, absolutely buying Ceedee Lamb right now. Like you said, before the Detroit game, I mean, this could be his explosive week.
Yep, completely agree. I love the buy on Ceedee Lamb. So now my next buy low is going to be Kyler Murray. I know everyone's like, oh, Kyler, he's so bad. There's some bad vibes going on with the Cardinals and Kyler Murray right now. So he just came off about 16 points, 15 points, depending on your scoring, in week 6. Even though he's had a bad game and been disappointing for the year, still he's QB6 on the season, which I mean, you can't really argue with QB6 when he was taken around QB6 or 7. Like, he's meeting his ADP. Now they get DeAndre Hopkins back. Unfortunately, they lost Marquise Brown for 4 to 6 weeks, is what the reports are saying. So he will be back eventually. He's not out for the year. So Robbie Anderson got traded there. That should help on a deep threat. So I think with D-Hop, Robbie Anderson, Rondell Moore, Zach Ertz, that's plenty of targets for Kyler to get going. In his career over the last 2.5 seasons when he's had DeAndre Hopkins, he averages 7 more fantasy points per game with Hopkins in the lineup versus without. And currently, the Cardinals are top 10 in the league in yards per game, but they are bottom 10 in the league in points per game. And that's because once they get into the red zone, they cannot score. Well, what did DeAndre Hopkins do really well last year? He scored touchdowns in the red zone. He had 8 touchdowns in 8 games last year, 8 healthy games last year. So he was on pace to shatter his career records, and I could see him picking up right where he left off last year.
The narrative going around Kyler right now means that you can buy him extremely cheap, much cheaper than like a Lamar Jackson. But these past 2 weeks where Kyler has, been getting so much crap for how he's been doing, he's averaged the same amount of points that Lamar Jackson has the past 2 weeks. But the narrative's different. I know the offense is a lot worse, and that's why people are panicking. But I think you can get Lamar light going forward if DeAndre Hopkins can stay healthy.
And Kyler is top 5 in QB design run percentage for the past 4 games. He is I believe he's had 100 rushing yards and 50 or 60 rushing yards of the past 2 games. So if that continues, that is a solid baseline and basically a whole touchdown advantage over the pocket passers that do not rush.
I'm not overpaying for Kyler personally, but if you don't have one of these top 10 guys, he is in that top 10 solidly for me. So.
Yeah, definitely don't overpay. But if you have Brady, I would turn that into Kyler.
Straight up.
Rodgers, I would turn that into Kyler.
100% Rodgers, yeah.
Geno Smith, even though he's outproduced Kyler to this point, I would make that trade. QB is around the 7 to 12 range. If you have a 7 to 12 range quarterback, I would try to get Kyler straight up. If they decline it, add a bench receiver, add a bench running back that you don't plan on playing, and just see if you can get the deal done.
Yeah, I personally flipped Geno and a running back this week for Lamar Jackson off of his 3 bad weeks. Yep. So if you can make a deal like that, I trust those guys a lot more. We've seen a lot more than we have with Geno Smith. I know he's really hot right now, but I feel a lot more comfortable with these established quarterbacks.
Agreed.
All right. My next buy is Chris Godwin. I think we mentioned him last week. I bought him. I did trade for him last week, and although he didn't score the touchdown, we were hoping for, he actually got a pretty good target share. I mean, and he has over the last 3 weeks. He played 89% of the snaps, which was better than last week. He was a little, the week before against Atlanta, he was a little limited. He only played about half the snaps. But in the 2 games where he's played over 80% of the snaps, he's gotten 10 and 12 targets. And if you're in a PPR league, that is really good, and I think that's only going to continue. They have a really high passing volume offense, surprisingly. It seems like they just want to run the ball, but it ends up Brady's throwing for like 300 yards a game. So there's going to be yards to go around, and Chris Godwin hasn't scored yet, but the points will come eventually. He's going to score a touchdown one of these weeks, and he's been pretty consistent even with, him coming back from injury. So I think he can only go up from here, and you can get him pretty cheap right now.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at the past 2 weeks alone, his usage is increasing drastically. So 2 weeks ago, his target run percentage, so the amount of routes he run per snap, was only around the 50 to 60 range, which honestly isn't great. But then you look at this past game, he ran 91% of the routes. So 91% of the pass plays that Tampa Bay ran, Chris Godwin was running a route on, which is elite usage. Mm-hmm. So as he becomes healthier, I imagine that's just going to continue. So get him at a discount while you can.
I also like their schedule going forward. They have a decent schedule.
The schedule is one of the easiest in the league. I believe I saw a top 10 easiest remaining schedule, and Tampa Bay was number 2.
Wow. Yeah.
In the entire league.
Trade for Fournette as well if you can. It's going to be hard, but.
Fournette, Evans, and Godwin, I would trade for sure.
Throw in Evans there as well because he also had a down week, and he's, I think, frustrated, and so the coaching staff has talked up forcing him the ball. I think he could have a big week in the next couple of weeks.
My next buy is Joe Mixon. This is not really a buy low. It's not really a buy high. Joe Mixon has been averaging around 12 to 15 points a game, which, hey, in this running back economy is more than you can ask for because there's been so many busts, so many roller coaster running backs that will score 25 one week and then 3 and then 5 and then 25. So 15 points a week is pretty solid floor. So last week he scored 16.8, which is his highest output on the season thus far. The past 2 games, he's averaged 5.6 yards per carry, which is amazing to see after his first 4 games when his yards per carry was pretty atrocious. But the past 2 weeks, he's at 5.6 in both games. So they may have figured something out with either the offensive line or maybe a run scheme or just ways to get him more open yards for touches. So he has the least touches in the 3rd most fantasy points per game scored. His efficiency is increasing. He's averaging over 70% of snaps, which is great. You love your running back to be on the field. And he's still not scoring touchdowns at the rate you would think he would because he's getting so many touches inside the 5-yard line, and he only has like 2 touchdowns on the year, and one of them's receiving. So if he just converts half of these carries into touchdowns, Joe Mixon is going to be a 20-plus point a week running back.
I think he's a locked-in running back 1 without injury. People are starting to – I've seen takes that he's washed after the first 4 weeks where he had less than 3 yards per carry, I think, averaging over the first 4 weeks. But like you said, over the past 2 weeks, he has looked a lot better on the ground. He's been consistent this year and actually getting passing work more than he has in the past, which is which you really like to see. The problem is he hasn't turned those targets into a lot of yards yet. And I think the main problem for him is probably play calling. Their offense is struggling, and Jamar Chase is a victim of this as well. Although he had a big week last week, he has also been struggling over the year. And so I think that has a lot to do with just the offense. If they can figure that out, then Mixon could go back to what he did last year and even more because he's getting more of a role in the offense. And I don't think that he's washed like these people are saying. I'm not overpaying for him, though, just because I don't super trust the offense right now. But they have a lot of elite weapons on their offense, and there's absolutely a good chance that they get it together. And, I would look to trade somebody who's in the running back 2 range for him, package him to try to upgrade because I think he's a locked-in running back 1. All right, so my next buy is DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is another one of those like borderline running back 1s, and he is coming back from injury. And don't forget what happened, guys. Although, yes, he did get injured and he did get vultured a lot on the goal line, he is still playing for one of the best offenses in football because of the offensive line. And he is still the best runner on their team. So if you can get him cheap, off of, the fear of the injury or the fear of Jamal Williams coming in and taking a lot of the work, I'm trying to buy, low right now before it's too late because I think he's going to come back. He's going to establish himself back into an elite role, and he was probably around the 10 to 12, running back 10 to 12 range. So, players I'd be looking to flip would be like, honestly, Miles Sanders, package Ramondre Stevenson plus, who I think might be a sell high right now. Aaron Jones, if you could flip Aaron Jones into him, I would do that. Players like that, even packaging David Montgomery, Najee Harris, if you can somehow put a receiver with them and turn it into DeAndre Swift, I really like that. So, trade for DeAndre Swift.
Completely agree. All the points you laid out. The one thing I would just say is I'm not paying the same price I was paying pre-injury, which most likely you're not going to have to because of the injury and because Jamal Williams has done so well. People might be scared off of a 50-50 time share. So if you can get him for exactly what he said, a middling RB2 packaged with a receiver for DeAndre Swift, I would do it every day of the week.
Yep, he definitely has a chance to break out going forward.
So my next buy is going to be Alvin Kamara. So all the fantasy people's opinion on Alvin Kamara sort of changed for the worst after the first couple weeks, and it wasn't great by any means. He scored 6 points, missed a game with injury, scored 6 points, and then missed a game with injury, I'm pretty sure. So, first 4 weeks, it was not pretty, and you thought you had the biggest bust in fantasy. Well, the past 2 games, he scored 20 points and 15 points, and that's with backup quarterback / Taysom Hill being the quarterback.
And no touchdowns.
and 0 touchdowns. That was my big talking point, is if he's scoring 15/20 points a week, he's had 6 catches, I believe, in both the past 2 games, so he's still involved in that aspect. All he needs is the touchdowns to come around, and he's going to be good. So he has 120-plus yards in each of his last 2 games. He has almost a 30% target share, which I would expect that to come down a little bit as their receivers get healthy. So once Olave's back, once Michael Thomas is back, Jarvis Landry's back, I would expect his target share to decrease a little bit. But if he maintained around a 20%, I would not be surprised at all. So, I mean, he's never finished lower than PPR RB9 in his entire season in his career. So if you could trade or package for him, which you might not even have to trade that high for him, just because the outlook the first 4 weeks were so low on him and everybody was like, oh, trade him low, get him off your team, etc. You could sweep a pretty low ball offer for him, like Miles Sanders plus a bench receiver or someone like that.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line with these kind of players is, like, he's just one of the best running backs in the league, period, like in the NFL. So I don't doubt these players. Like, after a few bad weeks and he's dealing with injury, I'm always buying a player like that. Another player that I want to mention that is very similar is Jonathan Taylor. I'm seeing a lot of doubt around Jonathan Taylor. You know, they're talking about how the offense can't get going, but last week the offense kind of got going. And if Deion Jackson can have a running back 1 finish, what can Jonathan Taylor do? I mean, he's been extremely disappointing this season. He had a big week 1 against Houston and then 3 pretty bad weeks. If you can somehow buy low off of that, then you could win your league off of trading for Jonathan Taylor right now. I mean, he's still, in my opinion, a locked-in top 5 guy. And when you look at the numbers on Yahoo, he is one of the most traded players. I think he is the most traded player on the platform, meaning people have very different opinions on what Jonathan Taylor is going to do going forward. So if you can find, the guy in your league and he has Jonathan Taylor and he's down on him, then you can absolutely make a trade happen. I know it seems impossible to trade for him, but you always need to try because you don't know if people are worried about, his performances so far, because he didn't really play elite defenses and he struggled. But we trust the process here and we buy elite players like this. I don't have any doubt in the talent of Jonathan Taylor, and honestly, what happened last week gives me a little bit of belief that the offense can somewhat get it together. Definitely enough for Jonathan Taylor to get it done for fantasy.
Yeah, so the offense actually did something different for the Colts last week that they haven't done all season, and they opened up the passing game like a lot. I'm sure most of it was due to not having Nyheim Hines and not having Jonathan Taylor playing, but Matt Ryan threw 58 passes. I don't think they'll throw that many every week, but if they hover around the 40 to 47 passes a game and Jonathan Taylor sees anywhere from 6 to 8 targets a game, which no one knows if he will, but why would you not use your best player on your team in that aspect? It wouldn't make sense from a coaching philosophy. So if he has a 5-catch baseline, 4-catch baseline, plus what he should be able to do in the running game, and they actually scored points last week, so getting in the red zone, if he's getting touchdowns like Deion Jackson did, then, man, he should return the value that you invested into him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing what it takes to get Jonathan Taylor on my team. Obviously, if I have a top 5 running back, I'm not trading. That's a lateral move to me. But other than that, I'm trying to trade pretty much any other running back below that to try to get Jonathan Taylor right now. I mean, yeah, he's going to be elite going forward, so trust the process. Also, I mean, Alec Pierce is an ascending, player right now. They actually they have a few weapons, so it's not going to be focused on Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman looks good. If Matt Ryan can just keep it somewhat together, then, he's going to dominate the second half of the season.
He should.
All right. Any more trade targets for week 7?
So I have one more trade for, and that's going to be T. Higgins. So he's kind of a polarizing player the past 2 weeks. I'm sure those of you that have T. Higgins know 2 weeks ago he goosed, so he had a 0 in all of your lineups. And then this week, the practice report was not good. He missed 2 practices in a row, and then got a limited practice on Friday. Generally, that leads towards a player not playing, but surprisingly, T. Higgins did play. And I believe or I would think most people sat him because, I mean, you're worried about injury.
Yep.
He just goose. You don't want to trust him. But he actually played over 80% of the snaps in this Sunday's game. He had the targets, but he just didn't produce for fantasy. Sometimes that happens. He played the snaps. He had a good amount of targets, but sometimes, stuff happens. You just don't produce. So he's coming off a 0-point game and like a 10-point game. If you could somehow sneak T. Higgins off of some frustrated manager's roster, maybe they just mad because, he scored 0 and then scored 10 and they just are unhappy. If you could sneak him, I would definitely do that.
He has a really good rest of regular season schedule. However, I will say the fantasy playoff schedule for him is rough. He gets Tampa Bay, New England, and Buffalo. But if you're a player who just needs to make the playoffs right now, he has a really good, schedule for the regular season of fantasy football. So he absolutely could go nuclear in the second half. And we saw it in the first few games of the season. He was on a really good pace. He just got banged up. Like you said, most people weren't even starting him last week. We weren't really, we weren't trusting him last week. We didn't expect much. So I think we can excuse the performance. And he did get 10 targets, so that's promising as well. All right, my last buy is Travis Etienne. We talked about him last week. That was our big topic last week. And the reason I'm bringing him back up is because he looked good on the field and he didn't smash for fantasy. So that's pretty good because that means that there's still a buy window here. And I just want to bring him up because this is one of these guys that could be a league winner. So I just want to make sure that you guys are trying to get him in a package trade of some sort, because honestly, he doesn't cost that much right now if the manager isn't watching shows like this that are telling you, what could happen. He's passing James Robinson in like snaps and carries. He's in efficiency. He's definitely better. Over the past 2 weeks, he's had 7 yards per carry and 8.6 yards per carry, which looks really good. He's had 10 carries in both the past 2 weeks. And last week was against a Colts defense, which is pretty decent, but he still got it done. And he's getting enough yards right now to get it done for fantasy. He's a flex option right now, but the reason I'm buying him is because of the potential that's there. A young player coming off of injury with a lot of potential and looks pretty explosive on the field. I'm still buying after a decent performance last week.
Completely agree. All right, so I don't have any more trade for targets, but I have 2 possible sells. Now, neither of these guys are a definite sell, but I'm just going to talk to them as if you can sell high. So my first one is going to be Gabe Davis. He has had 2 very good weeks the past 2 weeks. Everybody loves Gabe Davis. Everybody thinks he's the second coming. So if you can cash in on his past 2 games value and upgrade your receiver, so I wouldn't make any lateral moves. I wouldn't do anything like that. But if you could package Gabe, or if someone really loves him, trade straight up. So maybe, as previously mentioned, trade for a Ceedee Lamb, trade for an Alvin Kamara, trade for a Joe Mixon, or any other receiver around there. Trade for a Michael Pittman. Someone like that who is a number 1 on their team versus being a number 2. Because Gabe Davis, unless he is just taking that next step to becoming a wide receiver 1, he's going to be a roller coaster. He's going to be the Mike Williams, where he has explosive weeks and disappearing weeks. So that's just Gabe. So if you could sell high into a more consistent receiver or running back for your team, I would. But again, don't hear what I'm not saying. Don't trade him lateral. Don't trade him down.
We love Gabe Davis, guys. We like Gabe Davis.
We love Gabe Davis. But if you can capitalize on your investment, do so. My next one is going to be Aaron Jones. This one's pretty self-explanatory, pretty quick. Offenses looked bad. Snaps are very inconsistent between him and A.J. Dillon. It's like there's no rhyme or reason. They're just picking a dude and giving him the ball whenever, which isn't great. They're not scoring, which also isn't great. It limits running backs' upside. They do play the Washington Commanders this week, so I would hold him for this week. Wait and see what happens in that game. If he blows up, trade him immediately. Trade for any lower end RB1 to upper end RB2, and then some, or package a receiver. Get Joe Mixon, get Alvin Kamara, get
DeAndre Swift, the guys we talked about.
DeAndre Swift. You're most likely not going to be able to get Eckler or any of the top No Eckler, no CMC, no Saquon, because most likely those are untouchable. But any of the other guys, Dalvin Cook, someone of that nature, I would definitely do so, just to get yourself out of the murkiness of the Green Bay Packers offense.
Yep. To go back to Gabe Davis a little bit, like you were saying, we're not completely selling just to sell. It's totally to get a top tier wide receiver 1. He could end up at the end of the year. I could easily see him being a low tier wide receiver 1. And
Definitely.
he's in that range to me. Upper wide receiver 2, lower wide receiver 1. I'm going for that solid wide receiver 1 that I know is going to finish there. Ceedee Lamb, AJ Brown, even Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would take the chance on over holding Gabe Davis. Those guys have more elite upside being the number 1 on their offense. So that's all we're saying with Gabe Davis. For my sells, I want to bring up Najee Harris, who we mentioned last week. So we thought that Najee Harris had a pretty tough matchup. He played the Buccaneers. That is a very tough matchup, but he still got it done for fantasy. And that was completely off of the back of a touchdown. Half of his fantasy points were from that touchdown. Other than that, he only had 49 yards. Again, the passing volume isn't there like it was last year. If you can capitalize off of this week, I'm still trying to upgrade him right now because he is on really rocky ground for me. So try to upgrade him. Another one is Brandon Aiyuk. I don't know if you're going to be able to get much for him, but I think he's the perfect guy to put in a package trade right now as the second guy, just a shiny piece to put to try to upgrade one of your other pieces like we've been talking about in this video. Throw in Brandon Aiyuk, throw in Chase Claypool, throw in these kind of guys who had a big week who we don't like, going forward to actually continue to do that. Like Chase Claypool is not going to do that every week. Aiyuk's not going to do that every week. Like we know this. These guys are going to be inconsistent. So throw those guys into your package trades, your 2-for-1s that we always talk about. And that does it for my sells. Any others from you?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys for watching. If you could, please subscribe so we can bring out the content. We've been doing 3 videos a week. So we really appreciate you guys for subscribing, liking, commenting, all that. Thank you guys. You've helped us get to 100, so appreciate it. Anyways, we have been the Fantasy Bros, and we are out.